Welcome to Brash Ag, the farm innovation podcast with hosts Raymond King and Kit Franklin.
Namaste, Raymond.
Namaste.
How are you getting on?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, I'm back after. Well, this is the first time we're chatting on a podcast like this for a little while. We've been very busy beavers, and have actually managed. We've managed to bank quite a lot of content for our listeners, which has allowed me to go on a lovely holiday to France and allowed you to crack on with some stuff at your house.
Yeah, no, we've been we got quite a bit of that. We've got more to come. We've got more outside broadcasts to come over the next couple of weeks. But I have to say, I'm maybe slightly thankful we're back to talking on the internet. Just that it means when I'm come to editing the audio, I feel like the quality is just that bit more reliable via this means. I'm always a bit stressed as to how bad the wind noise is going to be when we've been in a field. But anyway, we're going to do a bit of a sort of news summary roundabout chat today, Ray. We've got various things that have come across our desks, as we like to say, that we think would be maybe worth a bit of editorial chat and discussion, and hopefully some insight for the listener.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I've got some paper here. You might not hear it. Probably the AI will get rid of this, but I have some paperwork here. So we've received a press release. So we must be proper journalists now.
Bloomin' Ada, we best get ourselves signed up to the Guild of Agricultural Journalists, Ray, like Andy Newbold always tries to twist our arm to do.
Absolutely, yeah. I've hovered around the application section of that website a few times, but probably this is our sign to crack on and do it. And no doubt Andy is shouting at his speaker or headphones right now as he listens. So, but yeah, we've received a press release. Press relief.
It is a relief because it means we don't have to keep searching for content. It just comes to us now.
Yeah.
Of course, we'll announce who sent us this press release, and we'll actually get onto what it says shortly. But if you're out there and you're from a agricultural company and you wish to add us to your press release list, then please do so. And remember, you can send things through to contact@brash-ag.com.
Absolutely, yeah. Do get in touch. We're always keen to hear about the latest goings on and weird and wonderful things in the world of agricultural machinery and agricultural technology. But yeah, our press release is from, but if I tell you the acronym to start with, you'll say, who's that? But then I'll explain further. So it's from TMTL. TAFE Motors and Tractors Limited, a wholly owned subsidiary of Tractors and Farm Equipment Limited, brackets TAFE. So we've had a press release effectively from TAFE. All about how they're opening an engine production line in India, but with a bit of a twist. Obviously, they are large scale manufacturer of their own equipment, but this is actually a manufacturing line for DEUTZ engines.
Yes. Okay. So this is interesting. So yeah, obviously they've been making their own engines forever as part of their work. I think what was it? It was probably 18 months ago that we covered that TAFE were doing deals with DEUTZ. Was it not, Ray?
Yeah, it probably would have been around then. I think it was as things started to die down with the court case between them and AGCO and I think it was an out of court settlement in the end, wasn't it? Between them.
I think the DEUTZ thing was earlier because that was part of our analysis. Was did the deal with DEUTZ stir things up a little bit in the AGCO relationship?
Potentially. So, well, obviously that was sort of part of our editorial and thoughts at the time. I think, well, right now, one of the interesting, what are the details? So the details are they're going to be producing 2.2 litre and 2.9 litre, which sort of covers 50 to 75 horsepower and then 75 to 100 horsepower engines for both domestic and international markets, with annual production capacity of 35,000 engines and 50,000 sub-assemblies. So it's end-to-end Industry 4.0 enabled manufacturing, with complete manufacturing execution system integration and digital connectivity across the production process.
No, so the big deal about this, just to jump straight away from the story in hand, is the fact what these engines will be. These engines will be homologated for European conditions, stage whatever they must be these days. Which was always that was what we believed at the time. The big type with DEUTZ was to get engines that were clean enough for European sales, for American sales. And so obviously that's what this is about, isn't it? This is about, although it says it's for domestic and international, I have a feeling this is going to be heavily weighted towards an international export of tractor, I would suggest.
Yeah, so I think what's interesting to note that actually it doesn't say anywhere in this press release that those engines will be used in TAFE tractors.
Interesting.
Yeah, reading between the lines there, that's either not the case and those engines are going to be for use in potentially DEUTZ tractors or engine sets for other applications.
Is this essentially DEUTZ reducing their costs by partnering with an Indian company and getting them made in India?
Potentially, yeah. And DEUTZ are owned by, is it SAME?
It's like a big group, isn't it? We should probably know this, Ray. Great. This is the beauty of podcasts is you can just do a Google whilst you're recording, of course. In 3, 2, 1, what have you found?
So DEUTZ are owned by SDF Group. Within that group, there's DEUTZ, SAME, Lamborghini, Hurlimann, Vitibot, which is actually a robotics company. So interesting there, focused on viticulture, so production of they call them wine robots, but I assume they're for the production of grapes for wine production. So is this perhaps this is an interesting angle to come from that, TAFE are providing the production facility for the engines. The engines will find their way into the smaller DEUTZ tractors and other tractor brands within the SDF group portfolio.
This has a lot of parallels and a subject I'm going to touch back on later in our episode, actually. But this has a lot of parallels to what's happened in the motorbiking world, whereby KTM motorbikes that are based in Austria, they're smaller models. Bear in mind, India produce a lot of the TVS group, etc. in India, produce lots of small model motorcycles. For the last 10 or 15 years, KTM small model motorcycles have been produced in India. In fact, I have a Husqvarna motorcycle, which is part of KTM group. That's been made in India. And now even KTM team up with now Chinese companies to make some of their larger models. So this is a sort of model that's been used where European manufacturers sort of hive off chunks of maybe the things that are more Indian appropriate, smaller engine sizes, smaller models, and take that production to India, do it in partnership with a lot of quality control. I mean, my motorbike's pretty good. I'm very happy with the motorbike I've had for 6 years that was made in India. So more than that, actually, 8 years probably. So yeah, I think this has got parallels with that motor industry thing, actually.
Yes, yeah, I think, and I think it's also interesting that although it might, we can only speculate, but I think it's worth thinking about the potential for those engines to find their way into some of the TAFE tractors. It's not beyond the, it's a logical next step, especially if you're looking from a sort of a more vertically integrated perspective, which is what TAFE are kind of used to doing, having all of the production capability under one group and going from start to finish with the manufacturing and sale of the final machinery, tractor, whatever it might be, out there into the market. So nothing has been said about that in this press release, and we should stress this is just our thoughts and ideas on the potential for the future.
But again, I think it also just shows what an international industry agriculture is. For those new to it, this is something I remember talking to my colleagues at Harper about a few years ago. I think we've mentioned it on the pod before, but it was like when Kubota went on their buying spree and bought up Great Plains and bought up Kverneland Group and Vicon and the rest of that lot. There's big players involved in agriculture. That some of these companies are big multinationals and they're doing multinational deals and they're collaborating and they're competing. And yeah, it's an exciting industry that is obviously slightly secret to probably most of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, very exciting. And as we said, it's our first sort of proper official press release, and great to have one from TAFE. We've been following TAFE for a long time now, and we've had lots of. I was very fortunate to speak to some of the key players at TAFE at Agritechnica, so that was a really great experience for me. Bit of a sort of red letter day for me, really, in terms of conversations that we've had through this podcast and people we've got to talk to. That was a really good one. So yeah, as we've said and as we've already said, bring it on. Send us more. We're always keen to talk and discuss and learn.
Yeah, and potentially we might have a very senior voice from TAFE join us on the pod in future. But anyway, we'll leave that one there. Next on our agenda then, Ray, is a sort of, could almost be in other news story, but I think is actually a bit more interesting than that. And that is the embracing of 3D print by some companies. And by some companies, I have two examples that are both sort of forward-thinking and innovative companies. So the first that I noticed this is a company called Festool. And anybody who does any sort of construction work or maybe joinery work will have heard of Festool. They are essentially the Rolls-Royce of hand tools in sort of the carpentry and joinery world. I am very happy to possess a couple of their tools, although I mostly can't afford them. I do have access to an awful lot of them because my dad uses an awful lot of them in his line of work. But reading through the Festool magazine that my father receives, they have started to understand that many of their users are 3D print owners. A bit like you, Ray, I can see your 3D printer behind you. Many of these forward-thinking and sort of high-end carpenters that are buying high-end Festool machinery are 3D printing things to help them along, be it brackets to help hang things on the wall, or maybe little widgets to help jig up gluing up pieces of work and all sorts of things. People are making little one-off 3D prints that they can use. And Festool have got behind that and are now promoting and selling filament in official Festool colours. So this sounds quite jovial other news story at the top. But you could buy Festool green and Festool blue, which is a really dark blue, basically black. And you can buy those colours. So when you're 3D printing accessories for your Festool equipment, you can have it in the correct colours. And not only that, they are also starting to encourage a sort of online open source accessory community. And I just thought this is an interesting way that the world can go. What with AI, the sort of democratization of design maybe, and the democratization of manufacture with 3D printing, it's exciting that a company as forward-thinking and as high-end, frankly, as Festool, they could say, look, we're really high-end. Our tools are high-end. You buy our stuff and our stuff only. We don't integrate. We don't help. But instead, they've gone, no, we want to encourage our users to be creative, and therefore let's get behind that. So that was the thing, and I probably wouldn't have brought it up on the podcast if it had just been that. But the next time I saw this was in Renault, and we all know that Renault cars, or Renault cars, or however you're supposed to say it, have a tendency to be, let's say, quirky, what with single spoke steering wheels and air suspension and the like. Well, in their new Renault 5 and Renault 4 models that are EV that have come to market and are very, very popular. You see a lot of them around and they look quite cool. In fact, I'm even vaguely tempted by a Renault EV, potentially. They have got a 3D printing initiative, which is called EPOP Factory, or it's a community via the EPOP Factory, which I guess you can Google. And basically, these are 3D printable accessories for your center console on your car as a starting point. So you could maybe put some sort of card holder or something in the center console, or a cup holder or whatever. And again, it just thought, this is obviously Festool, high-end Rolls-Royce of tools, getting behind customization, getting behind their customers being imaginative. Renault quirky, interesting, like to encourage, again, that creativity of their customer, are getting behind these 3D print accessories that you can fit into your car, and they clip in. And I just think it's a really interesting move. And I wonder if agriculture might go that way in time. I think it's going to be unsurprising. Again, my favorite get out of jail free card prediction, but it's unsurprising if you see probably a 3D printer in somebody's workshop in now, frankly, if not certainly in the coming years. 3D printers are going to find their way into certainly more advanced farm workshops. And maybe the likes of Fendt or, some of the higher end brands might start going, well, do you know what? Or Valtra. I think it'd be a very Valtra thing, actually. I think it'd be a very Valtra thing. They used to be able to sell you a tractor in any colour. Maybe 3D printable accessories, cup holders, phone holders, that sort of thing. So when you buy the tractor, you get a set of a sort of rail of universal clips or something, and then you can go to the library and 3D print whatever you want to hang on that row of clips. Might be quite a cool future, Ray.
Yeah, as you say, I have a 3D printer here. I use it a lot within Flint Technology for prototyping. Not only, as you say, it's not only for designing parts you might want to use or that might actually be the product that you are producing. It might also be jigs or things like that to help you produce something else. So I frequently use it to put a set of holes in the right place relative to each other, so I can do a one-off drilling piece. There's no point getting it CNC machined or anything like that, but it might be a quick jig or something. But I think it's interesting. You think about the two-way flow of this. So it's not only about users getting what they want out of the experience, but if you're a manufacturer, and I use this sort of broad stroke, it's not just Renault and it's not just Festool, but if you're a manufacturer and you can see what your customers are producing or designing or manufacturing, that almost becomes part of your new product roadmap and part of your
voice of the customer.
Voice of the customer, yeah. And you can make an assessment. Obviously, some elements you're going to look at and say, well, can't really endorse that. It might not be particularly safe. And that's on that one person to kind of make that decision. But there's a wider piece around, oh, well, actually, that is a really handy feature. Why are we not building that into our tools anyway? Or actually, that's a really handy, adapter head, so we can have a vacuum attached to our Festool jigsaw or whatever it might be, or your cup holder thing, so you can put a phone in it. It's thinking about the things as a manufacturer that you haven't thought of, that your customer is going, that's a problem for me. And I think, yeah, that's the piece for me. I mean, there's lots of open source websites out there where you can share, called printables. And I have a Bamboo Labs 3D printer. They have their own library, and it's an open source library, so anyone can upload their models. And if you're really happy with the model, you can tip the person that made the model. It's a two-way street of information, and I think that's what's really key. So I think, yeah, really, really important actually for manufacturers, if they embrace this and they use it in the right way, it becomes a really simple and easy way for them to develop their products without having to do, to a certain extent, their own prototyping. They're getting their customers to do it for them.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think it's cool, and I think I remember having a conversation years ago about electric cars and how electric cars were going to kill off sort of car enthusiasts because there was no engine to tinker with. And I remember saying, yeah, but the next generation will just be a motor tinkerers instead, and they'll be, rather than trying to fit a turbo into their little car or an engine that shouldn't really fit into the car into a car, or they'll just be trying to fit a motor that shouldn't really be in the car. They'll be trying to fit a Tesla a motor into a little Renault or whatever. So I think it's that thing of that those people who used to like tinkering on their cars and motorcycles are going to exist in the future, and it's just going to be a different place in which they're playing, and maybe that is a 3D printed place. And it's just great that companies are embracing that. And say, in the world of Festool, ultimately it's about people trying to get the most out of their very expensive tools, and why wouldn't you encourage that? And the influencer on YouTube loves their tools. If you're an influencer cabinet maker, they'll be using these things and advertising them. So it's all part of this wider indoctrination that Festool is the tool of the professional, I think. But in terms of the Renault thing, it's just about having fun with your car and embracing people's creativity, which I also think is cool. But yeah, I would like to see it come through to ag. and some of our ad companies be as open as that. And now, Ray, we're going to take a little dark turn, a nice segue from companies being really open to companies being dystopian and dark and closed with their technology. Okay, so there's this story going around that Ford, this is an influencer, I have to say, I think, who I don't know, some American, his name is Scott Lubrick, and he drives a Ford Bronco truck, which is sort of similar to a Land Rover Defender, really, for people who are unaware of what a Ford Bronco is. But basically, he says his Ford Bronco was bricked and basically just stopped on him in the middle of the highway as he was driving down the highway. Now, the reason for this is sort of, I'm not exactly sure. I think maybe because he was doing the wrong thing. I don't think, I'm not quite sure exactly what, but Ford hasn't confirmed that they have bricked his Bronco. But when you look into news sources that have sort of delved a little bit deeper, within Ford's documentation, there is now clauses around how they can turn things off in that vehicle. So if you say fail a payment on a car that's on finance, they can do things like, what they've said they will do is turn off, firstly, non-essential features. So they could, if you've not paid your finance, they could turn off your radio or your air conditioning or your cruise control, or that sort of thing. If you still don't pay up, they have got in their contracts that they could basically stop the car unlocking when you got to it. They haven't said they're going to just make it stop on you in the middle of the motorway, which is what this particular sort of content creator is claiming. But I think it's just but again, it's just that wider context about this world we live in, where do we embrace new technologies, allow people to 3D print, allow people to integrate their own ideas into our vehicles? Or do we live in this subscription world where everything is finite and everything can be turned off and you never really own anything? You just pay a subscription the minute you stop, the minute it stops. And this is where I come back to KTM, who I mentioned earlier, who themselves got into hot bother over this a few years ago with their customer base, in that they've had pay for extras on their machines for quite a while. In fact, another one of my motorcycles, not the one I was referring to earlier, one that's made it actually in Austria, I could pay for extra features on that motorbike, and I've chosen not to pay for them. So that's fine. I don't really care. But what they did shortly after I purchased my motorbike is they gave you those same options for free for 6 months, and then after 6 months, turned them off. And then said, now pay us. Now you've seen how good it can be, pay for it. Which I find really dystopian and horrible. So I never got to try these features that I've not paid for, and I'm quite happy that I don't need them. It does everything I want it to do. But the fact that they go, oh, have a taster, and then I'm going to turn it off, this vehicle that you've just paid us £14,000, £15,000 for, I think is slightly galling. So, yeah, I think we've gone from positives of embracing new tech to the negatives of this subscription world, Ray. What do you reckon?
I kind of agree with you. And I think it kind of almost touches on the data side of things that we've talked about in the past. You know, you can have these features on your machine, and sometimes you could say, well, I've paid for the feature to be there. It's gathering data. It's my data. I want access to it.
Which is probably where we both sit, I think. We both sit in that camp, probably.
Yeah. And I'd say certainly, you know, if you've got a feature on a machine and you're carrying around the hardware to deliver that feature, it seems a bit rich to say, well, you can carry the hardware around, but if you need to...
And you paid for the hardware when you bought it.
And you've paid for the hardware sat there, but if you want to use said hardware, how about you pay us? I think it carries through. I mean, there's a similar example, isn't there, with Tesla? I mean, they very much have taken the approach of a sort of upgrade on the fly. They've tried to treat hardware as much like software as they can. So, you know, there was a point at which you could pay Tesla, I can't remember what it was, about 1,500 quid, and you could have another boost on your power and speed, you know, your acceleration, which was a sort of almost a reverse example of that. They sort of didn't release it saying that was going to have that capability, but how about you have this as a nice little upgrade? And in some ways, I suppose you could look at that in the light of like an engine remap. You could say, well, the manufacturers turned around and said, well, here's your, well, we looked at them, didn't we? We didn't talk about it on the podcast, but when we went to serials, there's people offering remaps, and you say, well, Land Rover aren't going to offer you any more power or torque on your brand new Defender, but someone else might. There's analogies there, but I suppose the argument there is it's more sort of traditional hardware, and the argument always from a manufacturer would be, yes, you probably could get more power out of it, but we've decided not to because we want to preserve the longevity of your hardware, and we don't want to impact reliability. But I think when you're starting to get to the point where you've got turn on, software you can just turn on and off on the fly, and it has no impact on the reliability. It's not like if we switch this feature on, you're more likely to break down. I think there's definitely there's definitely sort of a dark side to that, which I feel is it feels underhand, whether or not it actually is, and whether or not it's written into the paperwork. As a customer and as a consumer, you feel as though you're being cheated. And I think the only other angle that I would like to kind of really dig into on this one is there's a safety aspect to this as well. And I think,
but that's obviously what this guy is saying is, that's his big, the reason it's gone global, because I don't think he's a particularly well-known content creator. I don't have a clue who he is, but the reason it came across my sort of sites was because he was basically screaming, they put my life in danger by turning off my car in the middle of the highway.
And I think that's the thing. And I think, like, when I'm working with people to develop new hardware and the software to support that, I always work from a hardware first approach in terms of safety and in terms of the ability to shut down a device. So if you're talking about something in a field, yes, you could have a really complicated technology stack of sensors and software, but the more software you add in there, the harder it is to know that you're going to definitely get the result you think you're kind of pitching for. And this kind of ties back a little bit to my experience in aerospace. So in aerospace, if you want to use a piece of software to control something that's critical to the flight, to something flying, the rigor that you have to put that software through is quite outstanding. It has to go through multiple different tests. It has to be checked and rechecked by various people. So, which is why software takes a long time to develop for aerospace, and why aerospace seems like a very slow-moving industry sometimes. But it's all for a reason, and that's safety. As soon as you start to get yourself into a position where you've got potentially fairly flippant, oh, well, we can just switch the engine off, or we can switch the batteries off, or we can switch this off on the fly, there's an argument to say, well, if that can happen on the fly at all, it whether or not you decide to do that, you make an active decision, there's always the outside chance that the software's had a glitch and decided, oh, I've had a signal and it says switch off the batteries. And at that point, everything grinds to a halt.
Well, they say the written example for the Ford thing is that they can lock you out of the car, physically lock you out of the car. That's fine if that car is sat on your driveway outside your house, I suppose. But what if that car is sat and suddenly, I don't know, a riot breaks out and suddenly you're put in danger and you get hurt because you couldn't escape? Or frankly, no, it is sat on the drive outside your house and your wife goes into labour and you can't drive her to the hospital.
Yeah. Or so, like our house, you've got one car in front of the other and that blocks the other car in and you can't get out. Or it's parked somewhere dangerous.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get to the point of like, at what point does... Yeah, it seems fine to say, oh, look, if they're not in the car, that's, nothing can go wrong. But it's like, well, actually, if you can't get in the car, there's certain circumstances where you've just, especially in an American system, you could be very liable for something that's then happened to somebody. So that is brave. And now we should link this through to John Deere, obviously, and the right to repair things that have gone on with John Deere, because this is all very linked to that. And in July, there was an outcome of that long lasting sort of lawsuit and legal battle that was going on in America with John Deere. And John Deere the result of that is that John Deere must now provide owners and third-party mechanics, essentially, non-John Deere dealerships access to diagnostic and service tools. They have been forced to do that, although there's still a clause in there that they don't have to do anything that would allow people to turn off safety features or understand any sort of trade secret that John Deere can claim. So there has been a sort of halfway win. You can't just access all of the systems in your John Deere. If they can say that the system you're trying to access is a safety feature, they can still block you out of it. But there was a sort of a fairly momentous thing that we missed because it was in July and we were mad doing our tour of the country and whatever else we've been doing, Ray, and getting that content out there. But yeah, John Deere did sort of, I guess, lose that legal battle to some degree, and the consumer won that battle to some degree in the sense that, yeah, you can now get access John Deere sort of diagnostics tools and things as a non-John Deere dealership. So this is all kind of linking together. It's all this sort of world. So again, maybe this story will get Ford into enough hot bother they might do some reevaluating of their choices.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think hopefully it serves as at least a guide, if not, I wouldn't say it's a warning, but potentially it's a guide to other manufacturers, including people like John Deere and other manufacturers, to sort of think about the value proposition to the customer and what they're paying for. And importantly, I think sometimes it doesn't come down to what they are or aren't paying for, but what they feel they're paying for and the value they feel they're getting out of it, because that's quite important. And that could be the difference between someone sticking with a brand or deciding to move away. So I think, yeah, definitely.
I think of the things we've just talked about, be more Festool, be more Renault, encourage people to be able to integrate and be creative with your product, be less Ford, be less John Deere. That's what we'd say. And I think also this comes back down to what it is to be a chartered engineer, which you and I are, Ray. There's an ethical aspect of and I love to use, and the joke is I used to use the clip from Jurassic Park when I would talk about this at Harper when I was lecturing this sort of subject. But, you know, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something as engineers. And as engineers, we should be conscious of that all the time. Yeah, fine. I can make a system that I can turn it off if you miss one payment, but should I do that? And I'd like to, be more Festool, be more Renault, everyone. That's a good result. Although, Ray, I think we're segueing again. We've got such a great little segue system going on here. I think you're going to take us through to more dystopia and more, or are you utopia with your thoughts on AI? This comes off the bounce. Last time we had a discussion pod, we talked about AI and my AI guilt, which I have to say I'm maybe coming through a little bit, and I've done a bit more with AI since then and felt maybe a little less guilty about it. But anyway, what are your AI thoughts since that conversation?
Yeah, so I've just been thinking. There's been lots of discussion around AI and employment, and AI is going to put lots of people out of jobs. And there's two strands to that. So one of them is I don't think that's going to happen. And having seen the outputs of AI, I know there's obviously talk of ever expanding and ever increasing powerful models. I pay for a subscription, and this is a nice segue, as you say, from what we were talking about just now. I pay for a subscription for ChatGPT, and it's an incredibly powerful tool, but it is just a tool. But in my head, I started to sort of extrapolate forward and say, well, in a world where AI did replace, within a business, say it replaced 80% of the people working within a business. And this is a sort of a thought experiment. Are we then at risk of effectively dealing with the world's best, most well-organized, unionized workforce that's ever happened? So if that happened across every business in the UK and potentially in the world, all of a sudden 80% of the labor that was being done by humans is now being covered by an AI large language model or some variation thereof. Most of those AI large language models are owned by a very small number of companies, the what was sort of referred to as the Magnificent Seven of, you know, the big tech firms over in the States. It's sort of constantly changing and constantly battling. But my thought experiment went, well, if you were to replace a large chunk of the people that work within organizations, you lay yourself bare to, as an organization, you lay yourself bare to having your arm put behind your back, again, on the subscription model. Well, hang on a minute. All of a sudden, the subscription service that replaced one person that costs, say, £100, $100, whatever it is a month, significantly cheaper than having a person on the books, suddenly becomes £1,000 or $1,000 a month. Where do you go from there? Do you go to another AI provider? Well, then you've got to sort of open up your structure and systems to pulling in a new model, and that model understanding how you work, and that model understanding what you do. And is that model going to be any cheaper, or is there going to be collusion between these big large companies to say, well, we've replaced most of the humans now within the structure, so actually no, this is going to be incredibly expensive. And at that point, are we any better off? You've got a very small, a very well organized sort of replacement workforce, effectively almost in a union of their own, where they just basically turn around and say, well, actually, you've replaced someone at £30,000 or dollars a year, and actually now the model is going to cost $29,500 a year because we're now part of your system. You can't remove us, and there's no competition.
Well, it's sort of neo-socialism in the sense that, yeah, everyone's equal, but some are more equal than others, is it not? We can all access these AI tools, and it's going to make everyone's life so much better. And shouldn't we be happy with our AI slop results? But yes, the people in charge can do what they like. Interesting interview with Elon Musk, The Economist have done in the last couple of weeks, and I've seen bits of, where he's talking about, again, I like to think he claims that his predictions are very, very accurate, and he gets his predictions right a lot of the time. I just think, well, the predictions I remember were about the Cybertruck and about his lorry that never ever came to market. Well, that both came to market dramatically late. Dramatically late is very bad grammar, but anyway, something like that. So I don't think his predictions are quite as good as he likes to think they are. But he's saying that give it 15 years, there will be exactly what you're saying. You won't need to do any work. Will you need and the question is put to him, well, will you need to pay more tax so that governments can give out a basic income to everybody so everyone can live? And he says, well, the thing is, AI and robotics are because they're going to be so ubiquitous, they will be deflationary in their results, in the sense that the products they make will become cheaper and the availability of those products will become greater. Therefore, the value of money will increase because the things you're buying will be cheaper. So he doesn't actually say if he'd be happily pay more tax or not, of course. But what he sort of dodges the question by saying about this deflationary idea of AI and robotics. But yeah, that only happens by accepting the opposite of what you've just said. That only happens if those robotics and AI companies all essentially for the greater good keep their prices low. But if they go, well, hang about, we're now in charge, we can just creep our prices up the same way that Netflix did with their subscription service, etc., then we're all scuppered, aren't we?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think what I would add is, I think that was a thought experiment that I went through my mind, and I was obviously you have to take assumptions into case to kind of build a model there. But I think the other thing to add is we're not paying the full price of these AI models yet. So most of them,
they are not going to get endlessly cheaper because at the moment they are undervalued.
Yeah, and so there's a large, although the use of them is software, there's a large hardware aspect to them, which is building data centers and all the infrastructure to support. But that is pretty much predominantly funded at the moment by venture capital and various IPOs and companies floating on stock markets and cash coming in from very large existing companies to basically subsidize that. And in doing so, us as a sort of a, you know, other businesses and smaller businesses and individuals get to use these very powerful tools at a very cut down rate versus what the actual cost of them would be, you know, given the amount of energy they consume, the hardware that they require, and the maintenance that's required to keep it all going. So I think a model now that might run, you know, if you could do a sort of a like for like comparison, a model now that might run and cost a user, or me as a user, whatever it is, £20 a month or something, might actually be worth more like £500-600 a month to actually, you know, for businesses to actually turn a profit. At which point someone like me might turn around and say, well, actually it's not that valuable for me. For other businesses, they might turn around and say, well, we've not hired, or we've actually got rid of people because we've replaced them. So now we need to pay £1,500-1,600 a month to, you know, to fill those two roles. And I just think over time, is there a world in which, you know, the cheap AI models start to actually kind of come in line with human labor? Obviously, there's some taxation aspects around human labor that need sorting out. So the work that humans do is you have to pay tax on that as a business, but the work that AI does, you get to claim back against your profits as a tax break. There's a piece there that probably needs addressing, and probably for another podcast at another time, but it does need thinking about.
I think maybe some more economically qualified people than us, we're drifting well and truly away from our topic area, Ray. But I appreciate that. Obviously, I took us down the route with my AI guilt. You're taking us to the point of, well, where does this all end? And there's certainly some interesting thoughts out there. The thing I'm going to keep coming back to, though, is in our world, and maybe this is being blinkered and maybe naive, but at the moment, physical AI is in its absolute infancy. So the actual application of AI models within physical machines that physically do things is very, very limited. It's image recognition and then mechanical actuation that's still traditionally coded. Going forward, this thing of physical AI, where AIs will be actually controlling mechanical machines, is going to be the thing that I think that the success of that will determine if Elon Musk is right or wrong. And I think in order to get to that future, there's a lot of jobs for mechanical engineers and agricultural engineers who are doing physical things in order to design those systems that are compliant with these new technologies. So there's plenty of work to be done in the interim before we're all out of a job, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, I don't think that's going to happen, because I think there's a necessity around dealing with humans. I had it only today with a delivery that had been missed for me, and the AI chatbot was very keen to send me in the exact same direction every single time, which was not, for me as a consumer, didn't get me any further forward. So it wasn't until I spoke to a human who could actually think, you know, join the dots and think around the edges and make decisions, that was okay. And I'm sure the proponents of AI will say, oh, AI can do all of those things for you. But at the moment, AI models, and I'll kind of leave it on this, but they're all pretty much set up to keep you happy. And who are you? Are you the person deploying the model as your chatbot, or are you the person interacting with the model?
Yeah. Very wise words, Ray. Okay, we're going to wrap up by heading out to an outside broadcast. So this is where I get stressed about audio quality again. But a few weeks back, probably frankly a month back, time flies, I hosted FIRA, or the GoFar company as we know them, and have had on the pod with Milena in the past. Were coordinated a group of Australians over to Europe to look at some technology here. As part of that, they made a stop at Harper Adams, and I showed them around Harper. And I just grabbed a quick word with a couple of people on that tour to understand what they were here in the UK looking for. It was, as much as anything, to put a bit of a pep in our technology step, as it were. Why would they bother to fly from Australia to come here? So let's have a look at that now. And we're going to first hear from Marie, who is part of the GoFar team and who was coordinating the trip for the group. Okay, so I stood outside engineering at Hard Problems now with Marie from GoFar. You've got Fira still on your jacket though.
Yes. Because GoFar is actually the organizer of the Fira.
Yeah. So we've had you. We've talked a lot on the pod about you anyway in the past. But say what you're doing this week in the UK with this group of Australian farmers.
Yes. So this group is really interesting on the solution for vegetables. So there is a program, the VegMate program, that's the idea is actually to bring all of this autonomous solution back to Australia, but it's just not to bring, it's also to understand how it's working and then make all the connection with the manufacturer, the farmers and the dealers. So they come here to have the feedback on farmers. So we went to visit G's or Fredericks. We are going actually to today to see PDM, and talking to you is just to open their eyes on what exists, what actually work. And yes, again, it's all about getting the feedback and then bring everything to their country, to Australia, and exchange with other producers.
Cool. And you as GoFar in that sort of arrangement, what are you doing? You're sort of helping matchmake and organise the tour?
It's exactly that, actually, because it's all of what GoFar is for. Our goal is really to promote and develop the agricultural robotic world, but it's also to help to develop the adoption. So Fira is very good because it's an event to see and the technology and the solution, but it's also, yes, exactly what you say. It's all about connecting the people, connecting the farmers with the manufacturer, connecting the farmers with other farmers. And then it's all getting the experience and feedback. And you talk about the economics. And that is really what's needed, because it is one thing to see a prototype. It is like we actually did this afternoon on the amphitheater, that it was understanding what will be the tomorrow's solution in the vegetables farm, but it's also how much it's going to cost, and is it worth it or not.
Yeah, that's Ray and I who do the podcast together. That's our favourite question when we talk to an innovator, is how much is it going to cost then? And often they don't like answering that question. So yeah, it's a good one. Well, I hope you have a continued successful tour, and we look forward to seeing you again sometime. Maybe bring another group to Harper Adams.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Yeah, well, we'd shown her a humanoid robot. We showed them a hands-free tractor driving itself, which caused a bit of discussion. And I mentioned about the economics modelling that we've done on that. And then we showed them a humanoid that my colleague Fernando and his team are working on at the moment. And then we took them into the lecture theatre to talk through the power of simulation, actually, and what simulation can add to the design process and solving problems quickly. So it was interesting, but they very much were asking that question of the simulation stuff. It's like, this is brilliant. Can we as farmers, can we access simulation technology? How much is it going to cost us?
Yeah, no, but it's really cool. I mean, it's cool to see. It's quite from my perspective, it's quite a melting pot of different things. You had GoFar, sort of based in Europe, predominantly French team, coming to the UK, but bringing Australian farmers. And kind of putting that all together. So it was good. It was good that you were able to fly the flag for the UK through Harper, and also the UK's growers are sort of are well respected enough to kind of garner interest, and drag people literally around the world. So I think that's really cool as well to kind of see that happening. It'd be great to see more of it happen, and maybe even a UK-based organisation bringing other nationalities to the UK to do something similar. That would be cool as well.
Well, this is what I was getting at when we were at Groundswell, because I was like, at Groundswell, I met 2 study tours, one from America, one from New Zealand. It was the week after I'd seen these guys. No, it wasn't. It was the day after I'd seen these guys at FIRA. It was the same week. These guys from Gofar at Harper. I'd gone from Harper to Groundswell. And I was like, we need to get ourselves on one of these study tours, Ray. We got to get ourselves on some study tours, I reckon. So,
well, maybe this is when we launch Brash Tours.
I think Brash Tours could fly. Get in contact at contact@brash-ag.com if you want to come on Brash Tours. We could go anywhere, Ray. Anywhere. The final thing we're just going to hear from the guy from the Australian government who funded this trip to see how the mechanisms that they use to fund this sort of study tour and how we might do the same thing, I reckon.
Okay, so I'm here with Lachlan. We're outside Harper Adams. I said that wrong, didn't I?
Lachlan, no,
okay, that's fine. You looked at me like I said it wrong. Okay, we're still outside engineering at Harper Adams. I've just shown you and your tour around a little bit, but tell us about why you're in the UK, what you're hoping to achieve, and what your specific role in that is.
Yeah, so my name's Lachlan. I'm from the Department of Primary Industries in Queensland, Australia, and we've got a group of 18 growers from all over Australia that we're bringing here with the VegMech project, where we're looking primarily at field technologies and automation. And showing them and giving a bit of a test to see what can we bring into Australia and collaborate with. And it's all funded by Hort Innovation. And it's been great at Harper Adams today. So thanks for showing us around.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you very much. Well, just how long are you here in the UK for, and what have you seen so far that was most interesting to you?
We're on day 2 now, so it's pretty early on. But we're here for 10 days. I think it's 4 days in the UK and another 5 days in the Netherlands. And we're seeing different types of field robotics, so pixel farming, farming revolution, and all the different big ones out there, and trying to see what works best and what growers really would like to see back in Australia.
Rightio. Well, thank you very much. I hope we continue to have a good tour.
Thank you.
So what we haven't said is that Tom Beach of Autonomous Agri Solutions was also sort of chaperoning this tour. And I've spoke to him in the last week or so, and he said the Netherlands leg of the tour was very successful, and some really interesting developments coming out of pixel farming and a couple of others. So at some point it'd be might nice to hear from Tom, who's obviously got his finger on the pulse of what some of these European ag automation and robotics companies are up to. But yeah, you could just get from that the fact that this is a sort of forward-thinking approach by the Queensland government to get new ideas into the eyes of and potentially in the hands of their growers,
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great to see the government kind of backing their growers and also sort of trying to make sure they're as up to date as they can be. And I think there's lots of lessons to be taken away from that, and perhaps again, hopefully we can see that in the UK as well, in terms of, and I think to be fair, there are some tours like that are certainly carried out. I know there's things that go on through Innovate UK that take companies from the UK and try and take them to new geographies to sort of learn about those new geographies, see if there's any fit for their products and services. And but I think that's already kind of 2 steps ahead, whereas actually just taking an end user, a farmer, to a new place to see a new product is a really good way of making sure you're at the cutting edge. And if you're not at the cutting edge, you're seeing what is at the cutting edge and what it takes to get there. So I think that's really great. So yeah, it's one of those things. It's probably really hard to, as a government body, to probably sit down and do the numbers on that and say, we've paid X thousand Australian dollars to send X many people out to this place. What are we going to receive in return? It's very hard to put an exact figure on that. You can kind of see that it will have an actual direct value, in terms of, prices for your consumers in Australia that are consuming Australian, vegetables and produce, in terms of getting getting products that are produced at a cutting edge for as low as cost as possible, and dealing with the challenges that are being thrown at Australian farmers, but farmers around the world.
Yeah, and I have to say that seeing what your neighbour is doing, or your extended neighbour is doing, is so valuable. A great example of that was when I was in the Salinas Valley in California, and they're running around with like 12-meter sprayers on the back of trailers and things like this. There was a lot of chat about this at FIRA in California, and then I saw it. And I said, why are you using such small sprayers being run around all the time for your veg? Why aren't you using big machines? They're like, it doesn't work with a big machine because, you get the boom hit the crop and it can't contour and we can't do this and we can't do that. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's true, because you go and look at PDM growing lettuces with a 52-meter boom sprayer, and it's just like, yeah, they're but in their heads, they're the best in the world and they're doing it in the best way they possibly can. And I would question if that's always true. Righto, Ray. Well, let's come to an end there, and just good to hear some extra voices at the end of the pod then, and we'll move on. But who should you tell about Brash Ag Podcast this week?
Well, let's talk of press releases. I think you need to go and find your local or your sort of friendly journalist and say to them, listen to Brash Ag. You might learn a thing or two.
Or PR representative, maybe. Your local PR representative.
Obviously, that would be great for Brash Ag, but
Marvellous. Well, let's do that. And if you have been, subscribe, tell a friend, tell your journalist, tell your PR rep, and we will catch you next time. Cheers, Ray.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Raymond King and Kit Franklin. Brash Ag. Thank you, and tune in next time.